The sun in Lagos had a way of burning deep into the skin, but it never stopped people from hustling. Everyone had somewhere to go, something to sell, someone to impress, or a prayer to whisper. On this particular Wednesday morning, the streets around Victoria Island buzzed with cars, horns, and restless feet. In the middle of it all sat Amaka, barefoot, dusty, and ignored by most. Her little corner near the luxury mall had become her daily post. A torn piece of cardboard was her sign, with faded letters, "Please help. God bless you." She was maybe 16, but her eyes held years of silence. She didn't speak much, just sat. Her tiny hand stretched out. Most people passed without looking. Some gave a few naira, some threw insults. But Amaka didn't move. That day, the air shifted. The sound of engines roared louder than usual, and suddenly, 2 black Range Rovers pulled up to the entrance of the shopping complex. Everyone looked. It was Chief Obinna Okoye, the billionaire oil tycoon, stepping out in his white agbada that danced in the breeze like it owned the air. His Rolex sparkled even in the shade, and his face had that permanent smirk of someone who never heard the word no. People whispered, "That's Himo. He just bought half of Banana Island last week. Money is talking." Obinna walked with 2 bodyguards at his side. The doors of the mall were opened before he even touched them. He was used to that. The world bent for men like him. Rules didn't apply. But as he approached the entrance, he noticed Amaka, and he didn't like the sight of her. This was his city, his playground. His name was on buildings. He didn't build this empire to walk past dirty little flies like her. That's how he saw her. "You!" he shouted, his voice cutting through the street noise like a blade. Amaka looked up slowly. He stormed toward her. "What is this, eh? You think this is your father's house sitting in front of where I shop?" He looked around, noticing the security and camera phones. "This is why this country is dirty." She didn't speak. She just stared. "Don't look at me like that," he barked. Then, slap! His palm cracked across her face with a sharp sound. That made the whole crowd freeze. She didn't cry, she didn't scream, she just blinked once, then looked away as if the slap meant nothing. But something shifted in the air. Something strange, quiet, heavy. From inside the mall, the manager ran out, shocked. The crowd started murmuring, "Why would he hit her like that? She's just a girl." And she didn't say anything, but Obinna turned, proud. "Let this be a warning to all these street rats." He didn't know what he'd just done. He didn't know who Amaka really was. He didn't know what blood ran in her veins, and he surely didn't know that within a few weeks, the same girl he slapped in public would be the name the whole country feared, respected, and owed apologies to. As the dust settled and the cars drove away, Amaka wiped her cheek gently, but her eyes didn't show pain. They showed a silent fire, the kind that doesn't scream. It waits, and when it rises, it doesn't. Warn you, it burns everything. That night, Lagos didn't sleep, but Amaka did. Not deeply, not peacefully, just enough to forget for a few hours that her cheek still stung and her stomach had barely anything in it. She lay under a broken stall, using a torn rice sack as her blanket. The city lights twinkled above like mocking stars, so far away, so cold. She heard the club music from the nearby street, laughter from people who didn't even know her name. It didn't bother her. She had lived through worse, but that man's hand, his slap, had stirred something inside her, not because it hurt. She was used to pain, but because it reminded her of a world that always treated her like she didn't matter. That night she didn't cry. She remembered. It had been 5 years since Amaka's life changed. She used to have a home, a real one, not perfect, but filled with love. Her mother, Chidera, was a school teacher, smart, proud, and loud. Her father worked as a mechanic. They weren't rich, but they had food, books, and dreams. Then one night her father came home with shaking hands and fear in his eyes. "They killed him," he whispered to her mother. "I saw them, Obinna and those men. They shot Tunde like he was an animal. I saw it." He was talking about his friend, Tunde Okafa, a whistleblower who had dared to speak against Obinna's oil deals. 2 days later, Amaka's father vanished. No body, no explanation. Just gone. Her mother tried to speak out. She was silenced. Amaka watched the woman who raised her get arrested, beaten and finally declared mentally unfit by corrupt doctors paid by people with gold watches and dead souls. From that day, Amaka was alone, on the street, surviving but not forgetting. And when that slap landed on her face earlier that day, it wasn't just an insult. It was a trigger. The next morning, something unusual happened. A man approached her spot, dressed in a simple brown kaftan, with eyes that scanned the street like a soldier. His face was kind but firm. "You're Amaka, right?" She narrowed her eyes. "Who's asking?" "I was sent by your mother," he said softly. Amaka's whole body froze. "What?" He nodded. "She's alive, and she's waiting for you." The world tilted. Her mouth opened, but no words came. He knelt in front of her. "Your mother. She never gave up on you. She found people, journalists, lawyers. There's a movement growing quietly, underground. People tired of Obina's reign. She told me to find you because you're the last proof." "Proof of what?" Amaka whispered. The man looked around carefully, then leaned in. "Your father recorded everything, the night he died. He left a video, naming names. It's hidden. Only your mother and you knew where. But now only you can unlock it." Her hands trembled. "Why me?" "Because," he said, "you were there." Back in his mansion, Obina poured himself whiskey and laughed with his friends about the beggar girl. He called it a teachable moment and didn't even remember her face anymore. But his phone buzzed. He picked it up. A message from an unknown number. "The girl you slapped is coming, and she remembers everything." He stared. His hand tightened. Around the glass, but it was already too late. He had made his worst mistake, not just by slapping her, but by letting her live. 3 days passed since the man in the brown kaftan found Amaka. His name was Isaac, and he moved like someone who had seen too much and said too little. Quiet, sharp, and always watching. He brought her food, water, and a phone. Nothing flashy, just enough for communication. But what he really brought her and was purpose. They met every morning in a small church compound just outside the city, away from the chaos of Victoria Island. It was owned by an old pastor who owed Amaka's mother her favor. The church had no congregation anymore, just dust-peeling walls and silence. But for now, it was the safest place Amaka had known in years. "Are you ready to go back there?" Isaac asked her one morning, pointing to an old abandoned apartment in Ajagunle. She stared at it from the distance. That was our first home. It was the place her father had hidden the truth. Somewhere inside that broken-down building was the proof of Chief Obina's crimes. A recording, names, a secret the country had buried. Isaac handed her a flashlight. "We go tonight." Meanwhile, Obina couldn't focus. He was used to threats. Politicians, journalists, even desperate ex-employees. He handled them all the same. The way, with bribes, silence, or is worse. But this message, "The girl you slapped is coming," up as it rattled him. He asked his driver, "Did you see her face?" "No, sir. She was just another dirty girl begging outside." "Check every damn camera in that area," Obina barked. "I want her name, her face, her family, everything." He didn't know that he had slapped a girl whose family he had already destroyed. That night, Amaka and Isaac climbed the rusted staircase of her old apartment building. The windows were broken, and rats scurried beneath their feet. But Amaka moved like someone walking through sacred ground. Room 3B. She stood, outside the door, her breath shallow. "He told me once," she whispered, "if anything ever happened to him, I should look under the floorboard near the window." Inside, the room was covered in dust and spiderwebs, a shell of what it once was. But the moment her fingers pried open that floorboard, her heart stopped. A small box. She opened it. Inside, a flash drive wrapped in a faded cloth. Her father's old necklace was tied around it. Isaac stared. "This is it." Amaka couldn't move. The necklace in her hand felt heavier than gold. "Let's go," he said. "We need to show this to the right people." "No," Amaka said, suddenly her voice firm. "Not just anyone." Isaac looked at her. "What do you mean?" She stood up slowly, her eyes burning. "We don't take this to the police. They're bought. We don't take it to the media. They'll twist the story. We show this to the people. 2 days later, a video surfaced online. It was a grainy clip of Chief Obinna yelling at a young girl outside a mall. The slap was clear, the crowd, the shame. Then it cut to a black screen. A voice spoke. This is not the first time he's done this, but this time, he slapped the wrong girl. Next, clip, a man's voice, Amaka's father, speaking in a recorded video from 5 years ago. They're killing people. Obinna and his partners. I saw it with my eyes, they threatened me. But if anything happens to me, this video must be seen. Names, accounts, dates. Then, Amaka's face, looking straight into the camera. My name is Amaka. I was slapped. In public. But this isn't just about me. This is about a man who thinks he's untouchable. It's time we remind him who holds the real power. The video spread like fire. By nightfall, it was trending across Nigeria. Obinna's phone didn't stop ringing. His PR team, his lawyers, his friends, everyone wanted to know if it was real. But it was too late. He had built his empire on silence, and now's a girl with nothing had given a voice to the people. She wasn't hiding anymore, she was coming. By morning, it wasn't just a video anymore. It was a movement. Market women were playing it on Bluetooth speakers. Okada riders discussed it at junctions. Youths were reposting it with hashtags like Justice for Amaka, Obinna must fall, and the street girl power. Even university students, always hungry for a cause, had turned it into protest chants. Obinna's slap had done what years of legal petitions couldn't. It exposed his arrogance in a way the public couldn't unsee. But the real storm hadn't started yet. Inside his mansion, Obinna raged. Who is backing her? He shouted, flinging a glass against the wall. Who gave her the video? His assistant, shaking, whispered, We're trying to track it, sir. The upload was anonymous, shared through multiple VPNs. Obinna slammed his hand on the table. She's a beggar. You mean to tell me she has a tech team now? He didn't know that she had no tech team, just pain, memory, and a truth the world was finally ready to hear. Amaka sat in the old church, cross-legged on the cold floor, reading hundreds of comments on her video. She had never seen her name so many times, never felt so seen, but she wasn't smiling. Don't let this get to your head, Isaac said from behind her. They love you now, but people are quick to switch. I don't want fame, she said quietly. I want answers, and I want him to fall the way my family did. Isaac nodded slowly. Then you'll need more than a video. He pulled out an old brown envelope. These are Obinna's shell companies, his fake foundations. This is how he moves dirty money. These were collected over years by activists who couldn't release them, until now. Amaka looked at the papers, then at Isaac. Why now? Because your face made it personal. People are finally listening, they're feeling it. She held the envelope like it held fire. Then let's light the match. Obinna's legal team released a cold, polished statement. Chief Obinna Okoye does not recall the incident. However, he apologizes if anyone felt disrespected. These recent allegations are politically motivated and lack credibility, but the people weren't buying it. That night, protesters gathered outside one of his plazas. Peaceful but firm, singing, holding up posters with her face and the words, You slapped one, we are millions. The police tried to scatter them. It only made it worse. More cities joined. At 3 a.m., Isaac received a call. She's been found, the voice whispered. Isaac's jaw tightened. Where? Inside a holding facility in Ikeja. Your source was right. They picked up her mother 2 days ago. No charges, no records. Amaka's heart dropped. They have her again? Yes, the voice said. They're trying to silence her permanently this time. For a moment, silence hung in the air. Then Amaka said without fear, We get her out. Tomorrow. That next day, Amaka stood in front of a silent crowd. No microphones. Just truth. My mother was taken again, she said, by the same people who took my father, the same system that protected Obinna for years. But this time, they won't get away with it. She held up the documents Isaac gave her. I have everything. The lies, the theft, the blood, the Video went viral again. Obinna tried to release his own counter video, an old interview about his charity work. It was flooded with laughing emojis and curses in every language spoken in Lagos. His power was cracking because for the first time, he was afraid of a girl with no shoes. The rain fell hard the next night, like the sky itself was angry. The streets of Ikeja shimmered with puddles and broken promises. Somewhere between government buildings and silent walls, there was a holding facility that didn't exist on paper, but every activist in Lagos knew it existed. Inside one of those cold, hidden rooms, Chidera, Amaka's mother, sat on a concrete floor, her back resting against a rusted pipe. Her hair had grown grey, but her spirit hadn't bent. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She just waited, like a woman who had already survived the worst life could offer, until a guard walked in and said, "She's coming for you." He didn't mean it as a warning, but that's what it was. 2 hours earlier, Amaka stood in the back of a battered van parked in a mechanic's compound not far from the facility. She wore a plain hoodie, no makeup, no attention. Around her were 5 people, young, angry, brave, students, street kids, a mechanic, and Isaac. "I can't." "Let you go in there alone," Isaac said. "You're not letting me," Amaka replied. "This is my fight." They had one shot. The plan wasn't perfect, nothing ever was, but they had blueprints leaked from a disgruntled ex-guard who was paid peanuts while Obinna made billions. They had a way in, not through the front, but under a sewage tunnel, forgotten, half-blocked, foul. Amaka didn't flinch. 30 minutes later, they were crawling through the tunnel. It smelled like death. Rats skittered over their feet. Every breath was a struggle, but Amaka didn't complain. She just kept moving forward. "This is the line," she whispered, "between talking and doing." Isaac looked at her in the flickering light of a flashlight. "You're more like your mother than you know." They reached the maintenance shaft that led into the facility. Isaac climbed first, pried it open, then helped Amaka up. The hallway was dark, cold, quiet. They moved like ghosts. Chidera looked up when the door to her cell creaked open. The guard stared at the young girl in front of him. "Who are you?" He didn't finish. Amaka moved fast, not with violence, but with precision. A single blow from Isaac's elbow, clean and quiet. The guard dropped. They dragged him inside and locked the door behind them. Chidera gasped, tears filling her eyes before a word escaped. "Amaka?" Amaka dropped to her knees, holding her mother's face. "I'm here, Mama. I'm real. I didn't forget." Chidera touched her daughter's cheek. "You're taller now, stronger." They both cried, but not for long, because footsteps echoed in the hallway. Back in his mansion, Obinna was hosting a private dinner for foreign investors. The news had been trying to reach him all evening. One of his facilities had been breached. A prisoner was missing, but he kept sipping his wine. "Ignore it," he told his assistant. "They'll all calm down by morning." He was wrong, because the next morning, a new video exploded across the internet. Amaka stood next to her mother, both alive, both fierce. She spoke clearly. They tried to lock her away again. They failed again, and now, "We are not hiding anymore." Behind her were documents, photos, names of people who helped Obinna cover up deaths, move money, crush anyone who stood in his way. She didn't just expose a man. She exposed a system, and this time, nobody could unsee it. The morning after Amaka's video went live, Nigeria didn't wake up the same. News stations that once ignored voices like hers were now replaying her words every hour. Political analysts were calling it the slap that shook the system. Radio hosts debated her courage. Activists used her name in their chants. Even the international press caught on. "Teen girl exposes Nigerian billionaire's web of corruption." But while the people celebrated her bravery, Obinna was unraveling. Inside his office, he sat in silence as his lawyer read the headlines aloud. "Sir, the Anti-Corruption Commission has opened an emergency investigation. Half your board members are jumping ship. One of your oil licenses is already suspended. They're freezing accounts." Obinna said nothing. The slap that once made him feel powerful had now become his undoing. Across town, in a tight apartment provided by one of Isaac's friends, Amaka And her mother finally sat at a table together again. No guards, no bars, no fear. Chidera looked older, her hands worn, but her voice was still firm. "You've done more in 3 weeks than others have done in 10 years. "I didn't want to be a hero," Amaka replied. "I just wanted to be heard." Her mother smiled faintly. "Sometimes that's how heroes are made." Isaac entered with a USB stick in his hand. "The journalists are ready. They want to run the full files now. Bank transfers, offshore accounts, even the witness testimonies from the oil spill deaths he paid to hide." Amaka nodded. "Let them release it all." Later that evening, the streets outside the government house in Erbucha were packed. Thousands of protesters. Not just youths, but mothers, elders, even people in suits. They held placards, photos of victims, and wore black in silence. At the front stood Amaka. She didn't yell. She simply stood there with her mother's hand in hers, a living reminder of what power should look like. And inside the building, government. Officials stared nervously at the growing crowd on their monitors. One senator whispered, "If we don't act now, this country will burn." The next day, the arrest order came. Chief Obinna Okoye, wanted for embezzlement, conspiracy to murder, obstruction of justice, and abuse of power. He was found at his Banana Island home, trying to flee with a private jet fueled and waiting. When nigh, the officers surrounded him. He tried to offer them briefcases, but they didn't even blink. For once, money didn't speak. They handcuffed him like any common thief and dragged him out, while neighbors filmed him with the same phones they once used to admire his cars. The man who once thought he owned the country was now just a headline. Amaka watched it all on a small TV. Her face didn't show joy, just quiet strength. "This isn't the end," her mother whispered. "I know," Amaka replied, "but it's a start." And for the first time in years, her voice didn't shake. She stood up, walked to the window, and looked at the street. Kids were waving at her from below. A group of girls her age were singing a chant with her name in. She wasn't just a face anymore. She had become a symbol, not of revenge, but of reckoning. 3 weeks later, the courtroom was packed, not just with lawyers and press, but with history itself. Every camera in the country was pointed at Chief Obinna Okoye, the once untouchable oil mogul now sitting on the defendant's bench, his designer. Soit replaced with a plain grey prison uniform. No bodyguards, no entourage, just a man slowly learning what it means to be ordinary. Amaka sat near the back, not needing to be in the spotlight anymore. The world already knew who she was. Now, she was watching what she fought for finally unfold. Her mother sat beside her, holding her hand with quiet pride. The prosecution rose. They listed charges like they were reading out decades of sins. Embezzlement of over $18 billion through fake NGOs, silencing of whistleblowers connected to the 2017 Delta region oil spill, bribery of government officials, including the falsification of mental health records to detain innocent citizens. And finally, the disappearance and suspected murder of Emeka Naji, a mechanic and family man. Amaka's eyes blinked fast, her father's name, spoken, in court, finally. Outside the courthouse, crowds waited, some with placards, some with hope. Some with pain, but all with eyes on one man, and one girl who dared to challenge him. The news channels ran headlines, "The girl who changed everything." "Street beggar turned national hero." Nigeria watches as Obinna faces his past. But Amska didn't feel like a hero. She felt like a daughter still trying to bury her father properly, still trying to give meaning to a mother's tears. Still holding back a lifetime of unanswered questions, Obinna's defense team tried everything. Claimed the recordings were fake, said the money trails were fabricated. They even tried to paint Amaka's father as a disgruntled worker, but the public wasn't buying it. The mood in Nigeria had changed. People no longer believed what rich men paid others to say. They believed what they saw in Amaka's eyes. One evening, after a long court session, Amaka was walking out when an elderly man in worn clothes approached her. "Are you her?" he asked. "Yes, sir." He held her hand and nodded, voice trembling. "My son worked at that oil site. He died in that explosion. We were paid 20,000 naira to stay quiet. But you spoke for all of us." She hugged him gently. We all deserved more. He smiled with tears in his eyes. Because of you, we have hope again. And in that moment, for the first time since her father vanished, Amaka felt peace. Back in prison, Obinna received a letter. It had no return address. He opened it. Inside was a single photo, Amaka at age 11, holding her father's hand, smiling on. The back, you should have left us alone. He crumpled it with shaking hands. He had spent his life building walls so high, he never thought anyone could touch him. But a barefoot girl had done what governments couldn't, and now his legacy was shame. 2 months later, the courtroom fell silent as the judge leaned forward and adjusted his glasses. He glanced at Obinna once, then at the crowded room filled with reporters, victims' families, government observers, and the millions watching. Live from home. In light of the overwhelming evidence presented, this court finds Chief Obinna Okoye guilty on all charges. There was no outburst, no applause, just a deep, shared exhale from a nation that had been holding its breath. Obinna sat motionless. He didn't flinch. He didn't argue. He just stared ahead like a man already buried by his own choices. The sentence came next, life imprisonment without possibility of parole. And just like that, the empire fell. Not with war, not with guns, but with truth. Amaka stood outside the courthouse surrounded by reporters. They shouted her name, begged for quotes, pushed microphones toward her face. But she only gave one sentence. I didn't fight this battle for revenge. I fought it so the next girl like me you wouldn't have to. Then she turned, walked down the courthouse steps, and disappeared into the Lagos evening with her mother. Beside her, she had no interest in fame. She had her freedom, her mother, and her father's name cleared in front of the world. That was enough. In the weeks that followed, life began to reshape itself. A scholarship foundation was launched in her name, the Amaka Naji Education Trust, funded not by politicians or celebrities, but by donations from ordinary people. Street vendors, market women, students, those who saw her and said, she speaks for us. She declined interviews from international networks. She declined awards. She only accepted one thing, an invitation to speak at a local school in Ajagunle, where the walls were cracked and the chairs were mismatched. She stood in front of the students, most of them in torn uniforms and tired eyes, and said, I used to sit on the floor like you, hungry, angry, forgotten. But I want you to know, your voice is never too small to be heard. Obinna remained in prison. His businesses collapsed. His name erased from buildings that once bore it like a crown. Former allies avoided him like a curse. Even his children refused to visit. He wasn't just behind bars. He was forgotten. And sometimes, that's worse than punishment. One rainy morning, Amaka returned to the old corner, outside the Victoria Island Mall. The same spot where everything began. It was quiet now, clean. The security guard nodded at her respectfully. She sat for a while, just breathing, remembering. Then a little girl walked past her barefoot, holding a small sign asking for help. Amaka stood up. She walked over, knelt down, and asked the girl her name. Ada, she whispered. Amaka smiled. Come with me. You don't belong here anymore. And hand in hand, they walked into the world. Because power doesn't always wear suits. Sometimes it wears scars. It walks, barefoot, and it remembers everything. The beggar girl who was slapped in public became the name that shook an empire.